She was Maria Collins, a quiet housewife known for her devotion and silence. He was Father Andrew Keller, a respected Catholic priest trusted with the town's deepest confessions. In St. Hilaire, their names represented faith, discipline, and moral certainty. No one suspected that behind closed church doors, their lives were dangerously intertwined. What began as guidance turned into obsession, and what remained hidden behind routine and belief slowly transformed into a secret powerful enough to destroy reputations, faith, and a life. By the time the truth surfaced, one of them would be dead, and the other would face the consequences of a choice that turned devotion into violence. St. Hilaire was the kind of town where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. Nestled between low hills and narrow country roads, it was a place built on routine, tradition, and faith. Every morning began the same way, with shop owners opening their doors at sunrise and church bells echoing softly through the streets. The townspeople took comfort in familiarity, believing that order and morality protected them from the chaos of the outside world. Outsiders often described St. Hilaire as peaceful, but those who lived there believed it was blessed. At the heart of the town stood the old Catholic church, its stone walls weathered by decades of prayer and devotion. It was more than a building. It was the center of social life, a place where secrets were confessed and guidance was sought. The priest who served there was respected beyond question. He was known for his calm presence, steady voice, and strict devotion to religious duty. Parents trusted him with their children, and elders looked to him for moral clarity. His reputation was spotless, built carefully over many years. A few streets away lived a housewife whose life seemed just as orderly. She followed the town's expectations perfectly. Her days were spent caring for her home, attending church events, and maintaining a polite distance from gossip. She rarely drew attention to herself, blending into the background of daily life. Neighbors saw her as responsible and quiet, someone who understood her place in the community. From the outside, nothing about her life suggested conflict or desire. Her marriage appeared stable, her routine unchanged. She smiled when expected and spoke little when silence felt safer. Yet beneath this calm surface, unspoken thoughts were forming. The same walls that protected St. Hilaire from the outside world also trapped its people inside strict roles. In this controlled environment, small emotional cracks went unnoticed. The connection between the housewife and the priest did not begin with intention or desire. It formed slowly, hidden behind routine interactions that appeared harmless to anyone watching. She visited the church more often than before, always for acceptable reasons. Guidance, prayer, and community work gave her regular access without raising suspicion. The priest welcomed her presence, believing he was fulfilling his role as a spiritual guide. At first, their interactions stayed within safe limits, framed by faith and discipline. Over time, those visits became longer and more private. Emotional dependence quietly replaced spiritual support. The housewife felt seen and valued in a way she had not experienced for years. The priest, burdened by responsibility and loneliness, found comfort in her attention. Without realizing it, both crossed invisible boundaries. What once felt guided by faith slowly became driven by emotion. Their meetings remained hidden, protected by the respect the town had for the church. No one questioned time spent inside its walls. This silence allowed the bond to deepen without interruption. Guilt followed closely behind, but neither had the strength to stop. Each believed the other understood the risk, creating a shared sense of secrecy. As days passed, fear became part of the connection. Every interaction carried tension, yet neither stepped away. The housewife began shaping her routine around these moments, while the priest struggled to maintain his public image. Their secret demanded constant attention, forcing them to lie through actions rather than words. The bond no longer felt innocent. It had crossed into dangerous territory, fueled by emotional need and isolation. What made it more powerful was the belief that no one would ever find out. The town trusted the church too much to suspect wrongdoing. That trust became the shield behind which their secret grew stronger, setting the stage for consequences neither could yet imagine. As the weeks passed, the weight of the secret began to change everything. The priest's once steady routine started to fracture in small but noticeable ways. His movements became rushed, and his focus drifted during daily responsibilities. The calm presence people admired slowly faded, replaced by visible exhaustion. Though no one spoke openly about it, some sensed that something was wrong. The church no longer felt like a place of comfort, but of tension hanging quietly in the air. The housewife felt the pressure even more intensely. Her home life continued as usual on the surface, but inside she lived in constant fear. Every knock on the door, every unexpected glance from a neighbor felt threatening. She became careful with her time, avoiding gatherings she once attended without concern. Sleep no longer came easily, and her thoughts were filled with imagined outcomes that always ended in ruin. Guilt followed her everywhere. It sat with her during meals and lingered in her silence. The values she had grown up with now felt like accusations rather than guidance. She tried to convince herself that the situation was temporary, that it would somehow resolve without damage. But deep down, she knew the truth was already too heavy to carry. Rumors began to drift through St. Hilaire, subtle and indirect. No names were mentioned, but curiosity spread. A change in behavior was all it took in a town where people watched closely. The housewife noticed a shift immediately. Smiles felt forced, and familiar faces seemed more alert. The priest felt trapped between his duty and his fear of exposure. The role that once gave him authority now limited his choices. The secrecy that once protected them began to close in, turning their shared silence into a source of constant anxiety. Both sensed that time was running out, though neither knew how or when everything would fall apart. The pressure of the growing suspicion pushed the housewife toward desperate thinking. The idea of escape began to form quietly in her mind, not as a clear plan, but as a feeling that staying in St. Hilaire was no longer safe. The town felt smaller each day, its familiar streets closing in on her. She started imagining a life somewhere else, far from judgment and memory. Distance seemed like the only solution left. Her behavior began to change in subtle but risky ways. She became impatient and restless, no longer careful enough to hide her anxiety. Without fully thinking through the consequences, she made financial decisions that did not fit her usual habits. Savings were withdrawn without explanation, and personal valuables disappeared from her home. Each action brought brief relief, followed quickly by panic. The priest, however, was moving in the opposite direction. The more the idea of leaving surfaced, the more firmly he resisted it. His position defined his entire identity. Walking away would mean public disgrace and personal collapse. Fear tightened his resolve to end everything quietly and return to the life he had built. What once felt like shared responsibility now turned into conflict beneath the surface. The imbalance between them became impossible to ignore. The housewife felt abandoned in her fear, while the priest felt cornered by her urgency. Their connection, once fueled by emotion, now revolved around survival. Trust weakened, replaced by suspicion and frustration. The town continued its routines, unaware that something dangerous was forming. Church bells still rang, and neighbors greeted one another politely. Yet beneath this calm, the situation was spiraling out of control. The housewife felt time slipping away, while the priest felt trapped by it. Neither realized that their opposing desires were pushing them toward an outcome far more destructive than exposure. The night everything collapsed arrived quietly, wrapped in heavy clouds and steady rain. St. Hilaire settled into darkness earlier than usual, with streets empty and windows closed against the weather. The church, normally silent at that hour, remained lit far longer than expected. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual, yet inside the air felt tense and unsettled. The calm routine that defined the town was unknowingly reaching its breaking point. Sometime during the night, events unfolded that would never be fully erased from memory. By morning, the priest was discovered dead inside the residence connected to the church. The position of his body suggested a sudden and violent end, one that did not align with the peaceful image he had carried for years. Objects in the room were displaced, and the careful order he maintained was gone. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident quickly raised doubts. News spread rapidly through St. Hilaire. Shock moved faster than reason, and disbelief filled every corner of the town. The church doors were closed, and police tape replaced the familiar welcome. Faith turned into confusion as investigators examined the scene. The rain from a night before had washed away some traces, but not all. Small details hinted at a struggle, something unexpected and personal. The housewife woke that morning feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The town felt unnaturally quiet, as if holding its breath. When the news reached her, the weight of it settled heavily. Her routine collapsed instantly. The safety she once believed in was gone, replaced by fear that refused to stay buried. Authorities ruled out natural causes almost immediately. The death was labeled suspicious, and the church became the center of an investigation. St. Hilaire, once proud of its moral certainty, now faced a reality it had never imagined. The tragedy marked the end of innocence for the town and the beginning of a search for truth that would expose far more. The investigation moved quickly, breaking through the silence that had once protected the town. Officers examined every corner of the church residence, documenting disturbed furniture, damaged surfaces, and items that seemed out of place. What stood out most was the absence of any sign of forced entry. This detail suggested familiarity rather than intrusion, pointing toward someone the priest knew and trusted. Attention soon shifted beyond the crime scene. Financial records, phone activity, and daily routines were carefully reviewed. Patterns began to emerge that did not align with the priest's public life. Frequent unexplained meetings and changes in behavior raised concerns. The walls that had hidden the truth for so long were beginning to crack. The housewife was asked to account for her movements. Her timeline appeared normal at first glance, but small inconsistencies surfaced under closer review. Her usual routines no longer matched witness observations. Surveillance cameras from nearby streets revealed late-night movement near the church on the night of the death. Though the footage was unclear, it placed her in an area she claimed not to have visited. Her financial activity also drew attention. Investigators questioned sudden withdrawals and the sale of personal belongings. These actions suggested preparation rather than coincidence. What once seemed like nervous behavior now looked deliberate. The town watched quietly as the investigation unfolded. Whispers grew louder, and familiar faces turned cautious. The idea that someone so ordinary could be connected to such violence disturbed everyone. Trust weakened, replaced by doubt. The church, once a symbol of moral certainty, now stood under suspicion. Every detail uncovered added pressure, tightening the focus on the housewife. What began as a private secret had grown into a public unraveling. The evidence did not scream guilt, but it whispered it persistently. With each new discovery, the possibility. As the investigation deepened, the full nature of the hidden relationship slowly came into focus. Evidence revealed a long pattern of secret contact, emotional dependency, and growing instability. What had once been carefully concealed behind religious respect now appeared reckless and dangerous. Investigators pieced together how the connection had shifted from comfort to control, creating a situation neither person could escape without consequences. The priest's recent actions showed a clear attempt to end the relationship. Records and personal notes indicated a desire to restore order and distance himself from the risk of exposure. This decision disrupted the fragile balance that had kept the secret intact. For the housewife, the possibility of being abandoned while carrying the full weight of shame became unbearable. Fear replaced logic, and desperation began to guide her choices. The night of the death was reconstructed through movement data and physical evidence. It became clear that the meeting was not accidental. The tension that had built over weeks reached its breaking point. What started as a confrontation driven by panic escalated into violence. The act itself was not driven by hatred, but by loss of control and the overwhelming fear of losing everything. Investigators concluded that the death was intentional, not spontaneous. Small details supported this conclusion, from the positioning of objects to the timing of actions before and after the event. The image of the priest as a victim of circumstance collapsed, revealing a tragedy shaped by secrecy and emotional manipulation. When the findings were presented, the truth shocked Saint Hilaire. The affair alone was enough to shatter trust, but the violence that followed destroyed it completely. The housewife's carefully maintained image dissolved, replaced by the reality of her actions. The case exposed how unchecked emotions, hidden behind faith and routine, can quietly grow into something deadly. In the aftermath of the arrest, Saint Hilaire felt like a different place. The streets that once carried quiet certainty now felt uneasy and distant. People moved through daily routines with caution, unsure of what to believe anymore. The church doors remained closed for months, not by choice, but by necessity. It stood as a reminder of how deeply trust had been broken, and how quickly familiar foundations could collapse. The housewife disappeared from public view, her name now spoken only in whispers. Those who once greeted her warmly struggled to connect her ordinary life with the violence she was accused of committing. The image of a devoted member of the community had been replaced by something far darker. The shock did not fade quickly. Instead, it settled into the town like a permanent scar. The priest's absence left a hollow space in the church and the community. His role had shaped much of Saint Hilaire's identity, and without him, the town faced uncomfortable questions about authority, faith, and accountability. Some residents felt anger, others shame, and many felt confusion. The certainty they once relied on was gone. As legal proceedings continued, Saint Hilaire tried to move forward. New routines formed, but the memory of the crime remained present. The case became a warning shared quietly among families. It reminded them that appearances can be misleading and that silence often hides dangerous truths. Years later, the story was still remembered, not for its shocking details, but for the lesson it left behind. The tragedy showed how secrecy can grow in places built on trust, and how unchecked emotions can lead to irreversible outcomes. Saint Hilaire never returned to its former innocence. The town learned that darkness does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it grows quietly, hidden within the most trusted walls.